Luke Carter had spent most of his 27 years out in the open lands of the Southwest, moving between ranches, cattle trails, and small desert towns where everyone knew everyone else. He was a quiet cowboy, the kind people trusted even if they had only met him once. His steady hands, calm nature, and honest eyes made him different from the loud, restless men who usually filled the saloons. Luke preferred the silence of early mornings, the sound of horses breathing, the dusty roads stretching far beyond the horizon. But on this particular day, something pulled him toward a small roadside chapel he often passed, but rarely entered. The sun was dropping low, turning the sky into warm shades of gold and rose. Luke stopped his horse, Scout, near the chapel's fence, and took a moment to stretch his tired legs. He had planned to ride until nightfall before reaching the cattle auction in the next town. But something about the peaceful stillness of the place invited him to pause as he walked toward the chapel steps. He noticed a woman sitting alone on the old wooden porch. Her dress was plain, simple, and clean, but what struck him most was the long veil covering her face. It fell softly over her shoulders, hiding everything except her hands, which rested folded in her lap. She sat perfectly still, as though she was trying not to draw attention to herself. The breeze lifted the edge of the veil, and she quickly pressed it back down. Almost in panic, Luke slowed his steps without meaning to. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel watched. He simply nodded politely, the same way he would greet anyone passing by. She lowered her head in response, a movement so gentle and shy that Luke felt a tug in his chest before he could stop himself. Inside the chapel, the air was cool and quiet. Dusty wooden pews lined the room, and sunlight slipped through cracked windows, making long beams across the floor. The caretaker, an elderly man with kind eyes and a soft voice, swept near the altar. He looked up when Luke approached. "Long ride today?" the caretaker asked. Luke nodded. "On my way to the auction? Thought I'd stop for a bit." "Picked a peaceful evening," the old man replied. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You must have seen her outside." Luke hesitated. The caretaker noticed. "She's been sitting there for days," the man continued thoughtfully. "Keeps to herself. Doesn't talk much. Folks say she's trying to start over. Came from far away. Hard past. Maybe nobody knows for sure." Luke didn't usually pay attention to rumors. He believed every person carried their own story, and it wasn't right to assume anything. But something about the caretaker's tone made him want to understand. "Does she have family here?" he asked. The old man shook his head. "No family. No close friends either. Just that veil and her silence." Luke looked toward the door, feeling a strange pull again. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe it was the way she held herself, quietly, but with controlled tension, like someone who had been hurt by the world, still hoped for a little peace. He thanked the caretaker and stepped outside again. The evening breeze had grown cooler. The woman was still in the same position. Though he noticed her shoulders rise and fall slightly, she seemed troubled, maybe even anxious. He walked down the steps slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he passed, a sudden strong gust of desert wind swept across the chapel yard, lifting dust into the air. Her veil fluttered up sharply, and she gasped, grabbing at it with hurried, frightened hands. Luke instinctively turned, moving to block the wind with his body. Giving her a moment to fix it without anyone else seeing, "It's all right," he said softly. Keeping his distance and his eyes respectfully lowered, her hands shook as she pulled the veil back into place. For a moment, she looked like she was struggling to breathe. Then she whispered a faint thank you so quiet that Luke almost wasn't sure he heard it. "No trouble at all," he replied gently. She didn't look up, but her shoulders relaxed a little. Luke stood there for a few seconds, unsure if he should say more. He didn't want to intrude or make her uncomfortable, so he nodded again, more slowly this time, and walked toward Scout. But something inside him felt unsettled, like he was leaving behind a question that needed answering as he rode away from the chapel. The sun dipped lower behind the hills, and the sky deepened into soft shades of lavender. The air cooled, but the warmth he felt from that short encounter stayed with him. He replayed the moment in his mind, the way her hands trembled, the soft whisper of her voice, the quiet fear behind her movements. Luke had seen many kinds of people in his life: reckless cowboys, travelers who lied to survive, families hiding sorrow, but he had never met someone who carried her silence with such deep sadness. The road stretched long and empty, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that porch. Who was she? Why did she hide her face? What had pushed her into this lonely place? 100 questions circled his mind, but none had answers. Luke reached a small clearing and stopped his horse. He looked at the fading light and let out a slow breath. He didn't believe in fate or signs, but something about that meeting felt different, like a thread had been tied between two strangers without either of them understanding why. He imagined her sitting, alone again after he left. Afraid of the wind exposing her, unsure of who she could trust, the picture bothered him more than it should have. By the time he set up camp under the open sky, the stars had begun appearing, one soft sparkle at a time. Luke lay back on his blanket, listening to the crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. But even the peaceful night couldn't quiet the image of the veiled woman from his thoughts. He tried to tell himself it was just curiosity, nothing more. But the truth grew clearer with each passing minute. He felt drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He didn't know her name or her story. He didn't even know the color of her eyes. Yet something about her loneliness reached into him deeply, quietly, without warning. Luke was the kind of man who helped anyone who needed it. But this wasn't the same. This was different. He didn't want to rescue her or change her life. He simply wanted to understand the person behind the veil, the person who whispered thank you with trembling hands. He watched the stars until sleep finally came. But the feeling stayed with him all night, the feeling that their story had begun long before either of them realized it. Luke returned to town 3 days later, but the small roadside chapel stayed on his mind the whole ride. He hadn't planned on seeing the veiled woman again. He didn't expect anything to come from their short meeting, yet something inside him pushed him back toward the same town where he had seen her sitting quietly, trying not to be noticed. The town of Redwood Crossing was small, with only one main street lined by old brick buildings and wooden signs faded from years of sun. People knew each other's routines, and any stranger was seen from a mile away. Luke didn't stand out, much because he had passed through many times, but this time he wasn't looking for work or a place to rest. He was looking for something he didn't fully understand, a face he had never seen, a voice he had barely heard. He tied Scout outside the general store and stepped onto the boardwalk. That's when he saw her again. Mariah, though, he did not. Yet know her name was walking out of a small sewing shop near the end of the street. The veil still covered her face, the cloth falling softly around her shoulders, moving with the breeze as she carried a basket of folded linens. Luke froze for a moment. He hadn't expected to see her this soon, but she moved with the same careful steps, the same quiet air around her, as if she wished to blend into the walls rather than be seen. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When she looked up and recognized him, there was a shift, tiny but real. Her posture softened, and she stopped walking. The basket lowered slightly, as though her arms had relaxed for the first time that day. "You're the cowboy from the chapel," she said quietly, her voice gentle and unsure. Luke nodded with a small smile. I'm Luke. Just passing through again," she nodded back. "I remember." Her voice carried something warm beneath it, something relieved. It was the first time she had spoken more than a few words to him, and he noticed how carefully she chose them, as if every word had weight. "You work here?" Luke asked, pointing toward the sewing shop behind her. She nodded. "The owner lets me help with mending and folding. It keeps me busy." Luke could tell she wanted to say more but didn't know how. He didn't push her. Instead, he asked gently, "May I walk with you to drop off the basket?" She hesitated for a few breaths, then gave a small nod. They walked side by side, though she kept a respectful distance. Children played nearby, and a couple of townsfolk passed them, glancing briefly, but not long enough to stare. Redwood Crossing was used to strangers, but a veiled woman always drew curiosity. Luke noticed her shoulders tense every time someone looked her way. Inside the shop, the Honora, kind older woman named Mrs. Dalton's, smiled warmly when she saw Luke. "Ah, you've met Mariah," she said. Mariah stiffened slightly as if afraid the woman had said too much. Luke kept his voice soft, only a little. Mrs. Dalton looked between them, reading the quiet link forming there. She didn't pry. Instead, she excused herself to tend to a customer, leaving them alone for a moment. Luke turned to Mariah. "So your name is Mariah?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't tell you at the chapel because I wasn't ready." "You don't have to explain," Luke said quickly. "People share things in their own time." His words seemed to ease her fear. She looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of her veil lightly as if the habit kept her steady. "I don't talk much," she admitted. "I've forgotten how to speak freely." "Then we can talk slow," Luke replied. "There's no hurry." Mariah looked up at him for a moment, and though her veil hid most of her face, he sensed gratitude in her eyes. After leaving the shop, Luke bought a few small items he didn't really need from the general store buttons, thread a new handkerchief just so he could go back to the sewing shop again. Each time he found Mariah quietly working near the window. She always greeted him with the same soft nod, but each visit added something new, a longer word, a small question, a slightly steadier voice. One afternoon, as he leaned lightly against the counter watching her sort fabrics, he asked, "Do you like it here? It's a town, I mean?" Mariah paused. "It's quiet," she said softly. "Quiet is good." "But lonely?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the threads in her hands as if measuring her feelings. Sometimes she finally whispered, "But loneliness feels safer than being seen." Luke felt those words hit deeply. It wasn't just shyness. Something more painful lived behind her veil. He wanted to ask why she thought being seen was dangerous, but he stopped himself. People with painful pasts needed time, not pressure. Later that week, Luke visited again just as Mariah was closing the shop for the evening. The sun had just dipped below the hills, painting the sky in soft blues and pinks. Mariah stepped outside holding a small lantern she used on the walk home. "Do you mind if I walk with you?" Luke asked. She looked surprised but not afraid. After a moment she nodded. "If you want to." They walked down the quiet dirt road together. The sound of their footsteps mixed with the gentle rustle of the desert wind. Mariah held her lantern with both hands, the warm light touching her veil like a soft glow. "You don't have to wear it with me," Luke said suddenly, then winced at his own boldness. "I mean, you don't have to feel embarrassed or hide if you don't want to. I'm not asking to see your face. I just want you to know you're safe." Mariah stopped walking. The lantern shook slightly in her hands. Her breath came softly, but Luke noticed the tremble. "I wear it because I'm afraid," she whispered. "Not of you. Not of this town. I'm afraid of memories. I'm afraid someone from my old life will find me. They'll take away the peace I'm trying to build." Luke listened quietly, giving her space to speak. "I know it looks strange," she continued. "People think it's tradition or habit, but it's fear. When people see my face, they remember me. And I don't want to be remembered by those who hurt me." Luke's heart ached quietly at her words, kept his voice soft and steady. "You don't owe your face to anyone, not even to me." Mariah let out a trembling breath. "But you. You make me feel like I can breathe, even behind the veil." Those words settled over Luke gently but deeply. He couldn't explain the warmth they sparked inside him. All he knew was that he wanted to protect that fragile feeling she trusted him with. They continued walking. When they reached the small house she stayed in simple. With a small garden behind it, Mariah turned to him. "Thank you for walking with me," she said. "Anytime," he replied. She hesitated. "You make me feel seen, even when I'm hidden." Luke's breath caught slightly, not from surprise, but from the quiet truth in her voice. He tipped his hat gently, trying not to show how much her words meant to him. "Then I'll keep showing up," he said. "Only if you want me to." Mariah looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small, steady nod. "I do." As Luke walked away, he didn't look back. He didn't want her to feel watched, but he sensed her standing there until he disappeared around the corner. He felt it all the way home, the beginning of something he hadn't expected. Not love, not yet, but trust. Real trust. Trust she hadn't given anyone in a long time. And Luke knew he would protect that trust with everything he had. The night air had settled softly over Redwood Crossing, carrying the quiet scent of sage and dry earth. Mariah walked toward her small home, her hands brushing lightly over the soft folds of her dress. For the first time in many months, she felt the weight on her shoulders lift slightly. The veil that had hidden her from the world no longer hid the fear she had carried. She had chosen, in a whisper, to be brave, and someone had honored that choice. Luke walked beside her, slow and steady, his presence calm and unobtrusive. He did not hurry her, did not speak too much, but simply allowed the night to surround them, the quiet between their words growing comforting instead of awkward. Every so often, Mariah's eyes lifted to meet his, searching for reassurance in the gentle curve of his gaze, and finding it there without question. When they reached the small garden outside her house, Mariah paused. The flowers, few but carefully tended, swayed lightly in the breeze. The soft glow of the moon illuminated the path, casting long shadows over the wooden fence. She set down the basket of linens and lingered, as if afraid to step fully into the security she had long denied herself. Luke watched her quietly, his hand brushing against his coat instinctively. He had never been one to move with haste, especially when someone fragile had entrusted themselves to him. "You're safe," he said softly. "No one can hurt you here." Her lips trembled slightly, and a small shiver ran through her. She had been safe in the past, perhaps, but not truly free. Every step she had taken had been measured, every word calculated, every glance guarded. Until now, when she had let someone see the real her even just a little without judgment, without fear of being taken back into the shadows of her past. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "To be seen, I mean, to just exist without hiding." Luke stepped closer, though still giving her space. "You don't have to know how. You only have to try. And you're not alone. Not anymore." Mariah let her breath out slowly, the tension easing from her body. She could feel the difference, the air no longer pressing down with memories, no longer carrying the weight of unseen eyes. Tonight, the air was hers, and she could feel it fully for the first time in so long. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me? For helping me, even when I didn't think I could." Luke shook his head slightly. "No, it's you who's strong. You did this yourself. I just happened to be here." Her eyes shining with unshed tears met his. The veil had been lifted, but it was more than the cloth that had fallen. The shield she had held over her heart, over her life, had started to loosen. The small, tender trust she had placed in him now demanded recognition, and Luke honored it without hesitation. She stepped forward, closer to him, though not too close, testing the ground of this new connection. "I feel lighter," she admitted softly, "as if a burden I didn't realize I carried has been lifted." Luke nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's the veil, isn't it? Not just the cloth, but all the fear it represented. It's gone now. You can breathe." For a long moment they stood in silence, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant whisper of the desert wind. Luke's hand hovered near her shoulder, offering comfort without touching. A reminder that he was there and that she was not alone. Mariah's fingers brushed lightly over the edge of her dress, grounding herself in the reality of safety, of trust, of something resembling peace. Finally, she spoke again. "I never thought I could trust someone again. Not after. After everything. You can," Luke said softly. "You can start now, step by step. You're allowed to trust. You're allowed to feel safe." Her lips trembled into a small, shy smile, the first real smile he had seen from her. It was quiet, but it carried strength. It said more than words ever could. "I am here. I am present. I am trying." Luke stepped a little closer, just enough to show support, not dominance. "You've already taken the hardest step," he said. "Letting me see you, letting yourself be free. Everything else is easier from here." Mariah's hands fell lightly to her sides, and she looked up at him. Her eyes reflected a vulnerability and courage intertwined. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, her voice almost trembling. "But I trust you." Luke felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet recognition of the weight of her words. Trust was not given lightly, and she had given it fully, not because he demanded it, but because she chose it. He wanted to honor that choice in every way possible. He leaned in slightly, careful, giving her every moment to step back if she wanted. His breath mingled with hers in the cool night air, steady and calm. "I will always honor it," he whispered. Mariah's eyes closed for a moment, and when she opened them, she no longer hesitated. Slowly, deliberately, she allowed herself to be closer. Allowing him the privilege of sharing this quiet, precious moment, Luke's hand rose gently, resting near her shoulder, not touching, not demanding. He gave her every chance to stop him. When she did not, he leaned in further. Their lips met in a soft, careful kiss. It was gentle, not urgent, a kiss filled with trust, comfort, and the unspoken promise of safety. It was not about passion, but about the quiet understanding that she was seen, she was valued, and she was free. Mariah felt a wave of relief wash over her. For years she had hidden, she had feared, she had doubted. But in this simple, quiet act, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Luke's kiss did not take from her. It did not demand, it gave. It affirmed that she could exist fully and completely, without fear. When they pulled apart slightly, Mariah's eyes glistened with tears of quiet joy. I never thought it could feel like this," she whispered. Luke shook his head gently, his own smile quiet but warm. "It's how it's supposed to feel," he said. Safe, free, and honest. For a while, they stood together in the soft glow of the moonlight, the world around them fading into a blur of shadow and quiet. Mariah felt the freedom of being herself for the first time in years. Luke felt the profound weight of trust she had placed in him, a responsibility he would carry with care and honor. She finally stepped back lightly, brushing her dress and picking up her basket. "I should go inside," she said, though her voice no longer trembled. "I'll walk you," Luke said, stepping beside her. He did not speak more than necessary, allowing the comfortable silence to settle between them. The walk to her door was quiet, but it was filled with the unspoken understanding of what had past a bond formed. Fragile, yet real, built on patience, trust, and mutual respect. When they reached her home, Mariah turned to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For tonight? For everything." Luke tipped his hat gently. "No thanks needed. You did it yourself." She smiled, a soft, warm curve of lips that spoke of courage and hope. "Then I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked, almost shyly. Luke nodded. "I'll be here." As he turned to leave, Mariah watched him go, feeling the small but steady beat of hope in her chest. The veil had been lifted. Her heart had been freed. And for the first time in years, she believed that life could be gentle, kind, and full of possibility. Luke rode away slowly, his heart calm, knowing that tonight had changed everything, not just for Mariah, but for both of them. It was the quiet beginning of a story neither of them could yet imagine fully. A story of trust, care, and the slow unfolding of a heart ready to love and be loved safely and freely. The days that followed brought a quiet rhythm to Luke's visits to Redwood Crossing. Each afternoon, he would find Mariah at her sewing shop, quietly folding fabrics, mending clothes, or arranging small piles of linen. She was always careful, precise, and gentle, but he began to notice subtle signs of change in her demeanor. Her hands no longer trembled as much. Her steps grew steadier, and when she saw him waiting, a small smile often appeared. Though she quickly hid it behind the veil, Luke had not expected this closeness, yet he cherished it. He did not rush her, nor did he force conversation. He simply shared the quiet moments, buying items he didn't need, leaning against the counter or sitting silently in the corner, allowing Mariah to work in peace. Sometimes the sun would catch the edge of her veil, and the golden light made her appear almost ethereal, delicate yet strong in her quiet way. One afternoon, a few townsfolk gathered near the shop. They were curious about Mariah, speaking in low tones, sometimes glancing toward her as if testing their courage to speak to her directly. Luke noticed her shoulders tense, the way her hands gripped the basket she was carrying. The townsfolk, noticing Luke, whispered among themselves. Luke's calm presence seemed to act as a shield, and Mariah's tension eased slightly. She trusted him. That was clear. "Are you all right?" Luke asked softly when the last customer left. She nodded, but her hands lingered on the basket. "I'm fine," she said quietly, though her voice lacked confidence. Luke realized that what she feared most was not just strangers, but the possibility of being confronted with memories she wanted to leave behind. He did not ask for details, understanding that the past was her own to share when she was ready. As the evening approached, Luke walked with her to the edge of town, keeping just enough distance to let her feel in control. The sun dipped low over the hills, painting the sky in gentle shades of pink and orange. The breeze was cooler, carrying the scent of desert sage and distant wildflowers. "You don't need to wear the veil with me," Luke said gently. "I won't judge you. You can stay hidden if you want, but I'll still see you." Mariah stopped walking. Her lantern swung slightly, and she took a deep breath. "I'm afraid," she whispered, "of being seen, of being remembered. People can be cruel. The past. It's not easy to leave behind." Luke listened quietly, walking beside her, his hands empty, his presence calm. "I understand," he said. "I don't want to take anything from you. I just want you to know it's safe to be yourself here." Her eyes, barely visible through the soft cloth of her veil, met his. There was a mixture of gratitude and fear, a fragile trust forming like a fragile flower in the desert. "I want to," she said finally. "But it's hard," Luke nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Then we take it slow. No rush. You decide each step." The moment stretched quietly between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Mariah's hands relaxed slightly on the lantern, and she continued walking. Luke kept pace, feeling a gentle satisfaction in her courage. Even if it was only a small act. A few days later, tension arrived unannounced. A group of men from a neighboring town had stopped by. Their voices carried curiosity and, unknowingly, a hint of judgment. They recognized Mariah's accent immediately. One of them leaned toward her, asking a question she could barely answer. Luke noticed her stiffen, her breathing quicken, and her hands clutched the basket tightly. He stepped closer without hesitation. "Leave her be," he said quietly, but firmly. The words were calm, yet there was a strength that brooked no argument. The men looked at him, sizing him up, but Luke's steady gaze held them. After a moment, they muttered among themselves and walked away. Leaving Mariah trembling but unharmed, Luke guided her to a small bench behind the shop. The sun had just disappeared, leaving a soft violet light over the town. "It's okay," he said gently. "They're gone. No." Mariah closed her eyes for a moment, shaking slightly. I thought I could stay hidden," she whispered. "I thought no one would find me." Luke placed his hand lightly on the edge of the bench, not touching her unless she allowed it. "Sometimes people find us," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean we have to be afraid." "Not anymore." Her veil fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. She reached up, holding the edge of it with trembling hands. Luke could see the conflict in her, the desire to remain unseen versus the desire to trust someone. Her eyes, glimmering in the lantern light, met his. Then, barely audible, came the words, "Pull it down." Luke blinked. He wasn't sure he heard correctly. "Excuse me?" he asked, though he could guess the meaning. She lifted her chin slightly. The first hint of vulnerability breaking through the guarded mask she had worn for months. "Please," she whispered again. "I want to breathe. I want to be free." Luke understood immediately. She wasn't asking for attention or for him to see her as a curiosity. She was asking for help to lift the veil not just from her face, but from the weight she had carried for so long. She wanted to let someone witness her strength, her survival, her courage. Not because she needed validation, but because she trusted him. He moved slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. Carefully, he reached for the edge of the veil. Mariah held her breath, gripping the bench, waiting for the moment she had almost feared her entire life. Luke lifted the cloth gently, revealing her face to the evening light. She closed her eyes, letting the air touch her skin, feeling the wind for the first time without hiding. Her lips trembled slightly, but there was relief in her expression, relief at finally being seen by someone safe. Luke watched her, feeling the quiet power of her courage. "You're safe," he said softly. "I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you." Mariah opened her eyes and looked at him, her own filled with trust and a deep, unspoken gratitude. She had spent so long hiding, carrying memories and fears, yet here she was, allowing herself to be known in a small, honest way. The stars began to appear overhead, one by one, twinkling softly. Luke felt the shift in the air, the silent acknowledgement of something new between them. It wasn't love yet, not the kind that rushed in or demanded attention, but it was the first step. The first moment of trust, unspoken, profound, and enduring. Mariah finally let out a soft breath, the tension leaving her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me and for letting me be me." Luke nodded, feeling the weight and importance of those words. "Always," he said. "I'll always see you." The night wrapped them in its quiet embrace. The town of Redwood Crossing faded into shadows. But in that small corner behind the sewing shop, a bond was forming, one built on patience, understanding, and respect. It was fragile, yes, but stronger than any obstacle they had faced, for Mariah. It was the beginning of a new life, a life where she could stand in the wind, breathe the air, and feel safe without hiding behind cloth or fear. For Luke, it was the start of a connection unlike any he had known, quiet, slow, and full of unspoken meaning. They remained there for some time, neither speaking much, simply sharing the calm night together. The lantern flickered softly, shadows dancing across Mariah's face. Luke saw not just the woman who had once been hidden, but someone alive, strong, and quietly radiant. Finally, she stood, brushing her hands lightly on her dress. "I should go home," she said. "I'll walk with you." Luke replied, not as a request, but as a promise, as they moved toward her small house. The trust between them grew silently. No words were needed to express what had passed. In the simple acts, his patience, his quiet presence. Her willingness to be seen, a new chapter had begun, delicate but enduring. The veil had been lifted, but it was more than cloth that had fallen away. Fear, doubt, and isolation had started to loosen, replaced by hope, courage, and a quiet belief that not all people wanted to hurt her. Some, like Luke, would simply see her for who she truly was and respect it. And in that gentle, slow, and unassuming way, Mariah felt her heart begin to open. A small, fragile part at first, but one that would grow stronger each time she faced the world with Luke by her side, not as a savior, but as a companion, steady, respectful, and patient.